So taste is changing. Everything is changing. So what is great in the past of the regions that were making wine is their adaptation, their ability to change, to innovate, to follow the new taste, to change the varieties, to adapt to problems. And problems are ahead with the climate change as well. So what is a matter of proudness for this region is not what they do now, but the fact that they were able to evolve.
Hey, welcome to Beyond Organic Wine. I'm Adam Huss. Thanks so much for listening. A majority of this interview with Marc-André Selosse is available only for paid subscribers to the Beyond Organic Wine Substack. You can subscribe and listen to the full audio on the Substack app or at beyondorganicwine.substack.com. And a huge thanks to those of you who already subscribe and make this and all the other content at Beyond Organic Wine possible. I couldn't do it without you. If you've read the book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, and I highly recommend it, if you haven't, you may be familiar with the term mother culture. This is what I refer to as the dominant culture. And in wine specifically, I refer to this as vinifera culture. It is very difficult to see your own mother culture because we don't see the beliefs of our culture as cultural and mutable and circumstantial. We see the beliefs of our mother culture not as beliefs, but as universally and absolutely true laws. We think a belief such as the belief that human life is the most important, most intelligent, most meaningful life in the universe as a self-evident precept, as fundamental to the purpose of existence as gravity. We see beliefs such as the belief that evolution was leading us to this current iteration of human development because we are the pinnacle, the highest expression of life's potentials, not as a belief, but as an obvious statement of the nature of the universe. When I talk about vinifera culture, it has quite a few of the same basic beliefs that we learn as laws, seen through the lens of our wine culture. Our global monoculture of a few varieties of a single species of wine, grape, is an expression of our belief, confused as universal truth, that the entire history and tradition of wine growing and winemaking was leading us to this moment and our current expressions of wine. We don't believe, we know that our favorite vinifera varieties aren't just delicious to us, they are the most delicious varieties that are possible. We might not all say this out loud, though some of us do, but we live out these ideas in innumerable ways as we speak about wine and grow wine and make wine and sell wine. We use terms like traditional or classical to describe the varieties we use and the culture that we think we can point to as a justification for continuing this monoculture. But when we merely scratch the surface of history, we find no evidence for monolithic practices or approaches, flavors, or styles. What we find is an iterative process of adaptation, of evolution, of constant change. Wine's heritage is not the handful of varietal fads that we use to organize our grocery store wine aisles and require in our regulated appellations. Wine's heritage is innovation because change, diversification, pivoting, in a word, adaptation, is the law of survival. The law of adaptation reminds us that a culture that does not change will die. And now, because my French pronunciation is terrible, Wendy Huss will continue with the introduction of my special guest for this episode.
Adam's guest for this episode is Marc-André Selosse. He is a professor at the Musée national d'histoire naturelle in Paris and at the universities of Gdansk in Poland and Kunming in China, where he heads research teams. He has taught in Brazil and is a lecturer at Ecole Normale Supérieure and Hautes Etudes commerciales. His work focuses on the ecology and evolution of mutual benefit associations, or symbioses. A mycologist and botanist, he works in particular on mycorrhizal symbioses. President of Musée, member of the Académie d'Agriculture de France et l'Institut Universitaire de France, he is editor of 4 international scientific journals and the popular magazine Espèce. He has published more than 210 research articles and 250 popular articles, which can be downloaded from his website, and 100 or so videos are available on YouTube. He has published books on microbiota titled Jamais Seul, Tannins, titled Les goûts et les couleurs du monde, and Soil, titled L'origine du monde, as well as his chronicles Petite Histoire naturelle, broadcast on France Inter, published by Etudes. He is co-author of a comic strip on soil with Mathieu Bernier. He was awarded the Homme Nature Prize 2020 by the Fondation François Sommer. Enjoy.
Marc, could you please introduce yourself and what you do? Welcome, by the way. Thanks for doing this.
I'm a professor at the National Natural History Museum in Paris. I'm a mycologist and a plant physiologist. I work on the interaction, the symbiotic interaction between some soil fungi and the roots of plants. And I have a passion for wine, I shall say. And indeed, some of my studies, some of our current research is done in vineyards. But the fact is that, first of all, the domestication and physiology and also the viticulture behind the winemaking is really something that is amazing for me. And I shall add that as a microbiologist, I'm fascinated by the fermentation process as well. So that's why I sometimes deal with that in Congress or for wine drinkers.
And I think you study microbiology in the soil as well, I believe.
Well, most of the microbes we study are in the soil, yes. The exact ones on which we focus and which do occur on the wine's roots are the mycorrhizal fungi. The mycorrhizal association is a very ancient as land plant, indeed, association in which soil fungi, some species of soil fungi, are foraging for nutrients, water and mineral nutrients in the soil for themselves in part, and they, in another part, devoted to the roots of the plant in exchange for a bit of sugar. Such fungi, for example, are the porcini or the truffles for trees.
Right.
But these are more microscopical fungi for the wines. But 9 plant species out of 10 has such associations, and that's the main topic of my research.
Got it. I read something that you wrote, and I've heard some things about some speeches that you've given. I've looked at some stuff online. A lot of what you do is in French, so it was a little difficult for me. I tried my best, but I probably missed some stuff. But the gist of some of the things that made me very interested to talk to you, I think the best way to go into it might be to ask you to sort of describe your perspective from a biological, a genetic, and just a process standpoint, what the current dominant wine culture, why is it strange, historically speaking? Do you see it as strange? I mean,
yes. Well, we cultivate a species, Vitis vinifera, that was domesticated twice, by the way. We know that now due to genetic analysis that allow to root our cepage, our wine varieties, into wild population. And there were 2 domestications. One, as we knew from archaeological data, in Caucasian region, 11,500 years ago. And at the same time, and this is very overlooked, there was a domestication in the region of Israel, Palestine, and this Levantine region was very overlooked by archaeology. And fascinatingly, most of the varieties we use now are from the Levantine, Israeli and Palestinian region, and the Caucasian domestication gave only rise to a very few current varieties in Balkan regions, not more. So that was done from a wild plant that is climbing on trees, that lives in very wet soil. Typically, in Mediterranean regions, you find it in the forest along the rivers. And it's a paradox because first, as you know, now we grow it as a shrub in quite dry soils. So the ecology changed a lot.
Right.
And this confers a lot of stress, which is turned into tannins and terpenes and secondary compounds that partly explain the pleasure of the wine, the taste and the smell of the wine. But the other thing which is funny, and not so funny if you think of it, is that we domesticated Vitis vinifera that belongs to a genus that has tens of species. There are tens, nearly 30 species living in Asia. There are nearly the same number of species growing in America. These are different
Right.
species like Vitis amurensis, Vitis rupestris, etc., etc. So
Right.
finally, the domestication occurred in the region where there was the least species.
Diversity. Yeah.
But then there was a funny issue that, well, you could imagine, by the way, that Vitis vinifera is issuing from the Asiatic Vitis species. But that's not true. It seems that, phylogenetically speaking, in terms of reconstruction by way of DNA comparison of the ancestry of species, it seems that Vitis vinifera comes from America. Funny, huh?
Uh-huh.
It's not the easiest way to it's easier to go from Asia to Europe, but from North America to Europe, it was quite probably a difficult way. But anyway, it seems it's there are cousins in America for Vitis vinifera. Anyway, the drama is that when it escaped from
Right.
America, it escaped also from illness that occur in America, or
Right.
illness that also occurs for some of them in Asia. And then when contact was made with America, with a lot of travels between Europe and America, the illness from America came to Vitis vinifera that was no more selected to avoid them. That's why we
You're
had
talking about
phylloxera insect,
mildews and phylloxera and everything. Yeah.
the mildew as well, the
Yeah.
powdery mildew also. And you know what?
Right.
That's a funny story. The American species were resistant, so people were bringing them to Europe to study them when powdery mildew first arose. And by bringing those species to study them, they were bringing mildew. And
Right.
then, when faster ships were allowed to were able to cross within few weeks the Northern Atlantic, the introduction of Vitis species from America also allowed introduction of a small insect, phylloxera, that normally didn't survive the long travel when the ships were just propelled by wind, but which survived on steamboats, the shorter way. And so we introduced one by one those catastrophes. And then not only they invaded Europe, but also from there, they went to invade the other places in the world where, especially the southern hemisphere, where there is no Vitis species. Those illness, they colonized from Europe by way of our travels, the other regions of the world where the Vitis vinifera was introduced. And well, now the result is that first, the Vitis vinifera is nearly everywhere grafted on the rootstock that is of American origin and which is resistant to phylloxera. But second, we use a lot of pesticides to kill powdery mildew. Oidium is the other name of powdery mildew, and mildew. Asmopara is the other name of powdery mildew.
We call it downy. Yeah. And this, I mean, can you envision a different version of wine, or where do we go from here?
First, some people claim today that non-grafted Vitis vinifera have better taste. By the way, there are people in Europe that are fighting for a UNESCO label of humanity patrimony for the non-grafted fields. Let me be clear. They exist in some very specific conditions. When the soil is too sandy, the insect is crushed by the grains of sand. Or when there is flooding in winter time, the insect simply cannot respire anymore. And so in some specific soil, which are very wet in winter, flooded even, or very sandy, there are such cepage. But I don't think we can hope in the near future to get that everywhere, because the insect is everywhere. Well, it's still not everywhere in Chile, Argentina. There are some places where it still didn't arrive, but I'm pretty sure it's a matter of time. So maybe we will have the cepage in some regions where the soil is allowing that, is permissive. And to have tasted those wines myself in pairwise comparison of grafted, non-grafted, I would say it's not necessarily better, it's just different. So it's a patrimony, and for sure we need to have that. But for the grafting, I think it's for long. And it's not very easy by hybridization to transfer the resistance to phylloxera to Vitis vinifera. So I'd say grafting is forever, and phylloxera is kept away by this method. For pesticides, it's a big issue for environment and for health. You have to imagine that in individual alcoholic solution as wine, there can be some some remains. And recently, the actuality, I don't know if you had it on the other side of the Atlantic, but we went aware that there were very high level of trifluoroacetic acid in wine, sometimes up to 100% the maximal amount allowed in water, in drinkable water. So this is largely, not only, but largely a residue of pesticide. So we have to lower the
Yeah.
pesticide, but also for the environment, by the way, and also for the
Yeah.
drinkable water that is polluted by that. The solution is both anciently known and recently reborn. Anciently known. Those are the hybrids. You know, when you make hybrids between Vitis vinifera and American species, you can introgress, as we say. We can have hybrids that have resistance to mildew and oidium, and they need much less treatments. Unfortunately, the first generation have a very specific taste. They are very acidic.
Well, it
And
depends on the species that you cross with, right?
well,
I mean,
for
there's
the
so
first
many species. It
generation,
depends on what
so
species you
much.
cross with. Yeah.
But you're right, there are some exceptions. But the fact is that you get some foxed notes which are not so nice as a persistence. You get also a very interesting fruitiness sometimes. So, but it's
You're talking
different.
about Labrusca. So that's specifically Vitis Labrusca.
Vitis labrusca, yes, it is giving
Yeah.
very
Right.
berry,
Right.
black currant, sorry, or strawberry taste. But
Yeah.
yeah, well, you can limit the foxed taste, but
I'm
we
not
need.
even sure it's that real, but
Well, no, well, I have been tasting some Clinton, for example, or Noah,
yeah.
homemade. So okay,
Yeah. Yeah. So
Plain
maybe
Mountain.
then.
It's funny, but it's just funny. Let's say that we don't stick to that. We can make further crossings, and we have all nowadays genetic tools to ensure that in the following generations we keep the genes that give the resistance, and we can go to a construction genetically not modified, just you make sex, old style sex
Yeah.
pollination,
Yeah.
but you check that
Pollination.
in offspring you have the genetic resistance, and you taste the ones that are good in taste, and you get to a phenomenon that is no more hybridization but what we call introgression. You slowly introduce the resistance genes into a background, a genetic background that is nearly purely Vitis vinifera. We did it in France, for example, with some cepages that are called the res dur, for
Yeah.
resistance durable. That means durable resistance,
Right.
because since they pile up to 3 genes against mildew and up to 3 genes against powdery mildew, it's very difficult for the fungus to evolve and become resistant to this resistance. So it's a kind of evolutionary stable strategy that we reach. The quality of the wine is good, but the cepage, the varieties, they have to find their terroir. Their names are Voltis, Floréal, Artaban, Solanor, Opalor. Voltis, for example, is already a good candidate for champagne because it gives an acidity that, due to climate change, starts to be too subtle or insufficient for champagne. Others are very promising in other regions, and the true thing is that we have to find where they fit the terroir. Anyway, coming back to those new generation resistance, they reduce the use of pesticide by 60 to 80%. That's enormous. Of course, you still have black rots and some other illness of the wood like Eutypiosis or dead arm, and so you need a treatment, but you really limit the quantity of treatment. There I say that they are much more interesting than the hybrids that have been developed by the German or Swiss or even Italian research, because those hybrids like Sauvigny Gris, like Hibernal, etc., which are very good in taste. I don't contest that. They often have one to at most two resistant genes. So it's very easy for the pathogens to evolve resistance to those resistance. And so you lose step by step your tools. Whereas when you put all your tools on the table at the same point in a variety that has many resistance, you are able to make a kind of wall to the evolution of the pathogens. And you are able to reduce the use of pesticides. It's one of the fabulous examples where, with the knowledge we have from ecology and physiology and evolution, we can substitute biology to chemistry, biological technologies to chemical technology.
Fantastic.
And and it is very good also for the winemakers because they suffer a lot from the toxicity of pesticides.
Yeah. And the vineyard workers and everybody around the community that lives around the vines. Yeah.
There are some good works from California showing that when you are nearby a vineyard, you have a bit of those illness that are increasing for winemakers as well.
Yeah. California, Bordeaux. I think there were some, toxic.
Let me give you an example. When you are in a place where there is around you, in 1 kilometer around you, 10% more wine area, you have a risk of leukemia that is increased by 10%.
Yeah.
Even if you're not a winemaker. So there are clear evidence that there is toxicity, and for wine, which is not necessary. Wine is a cultural thing. It's not necessary. It's great. I love wine, but we don't need it. So going to death because of something you don't need, no, that's not the pleasure of wine. That's not the culture of wine.
That's right. Yeah. Let me step back a little bit.
Please.
With the grafting. So there were some unintended consequences. Now, obviously, you're looking for solutions to phylloxera, but what were some of the unintended consequences of grafting? Like, how did it shape sort of the cost or the barrier of entry to growing a vineyard, or and who gets to develop a wine culture and the sort of rationale behind the wine because of that?
Because of the grafting.
Does that make sense? Because of grafting, yeah. Like, what were some of the unintended consequences of grafting?
The grafting has a strength, which is that you fight against phylloxera with a tool that is quite, first, that is less toxic than the pesticides that were once used, that were even more toxic than what you can still have in the wine. So the sulfur of carbon, for example, was a very toxic thing. You don't need to water your wines and to float them in winter, which was a solution that was applied. No, it's really an elegant solution. But first, we preserved our old cepage and we started not to think of new ones. And I told you, new ones, it's a good way to adapt to pathogens. But please, keep in mind that we also have to cope with climate change. So having new cepage is an idea to move on against pathogens and to adapt to climate change. So we were a bit in our minds simply stopping evolving. Whereas when you look at the evolution of winemaking, it was a permanent change. When we have the phylloxera crisis, for example, Malbec disappeared from Bordeaux region. We still have it in Cahors. But in Bordeaux, where it was one of the components of even the wines classified in the 1855 classement, it disappeared. And still the wine was good. All the traditional cepage of Languedoc-Roussillon, they disappeared. Languedoc-Roussillon was replanted, not with its own cepage, but with the one coming from the Rhône Valley, Carignan, Syrah, Grenache, etc. Loin de l'Œil, Picpoul Rouge, Trélan, they are not more there. Or only in some vineyards where people are making a collection, but some of them are not even allowed in the appellation d'origine contrôlée. So that you sell them then as a wine of France. You don't have to sell them as a wine of Languedoc-Roussillon. It's so funny to see how much they were changed until the 19th century, and then now we stop because we can graft. So we go on grafting what we have, and also we tend to graft much less diversity than we have. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing, the second problem with grafting is that you create a zone of contact between the rootstock and the grafted aerial parts. And this is facilitating the generations and entrance of those illness of the wood, otypiosis, or even more pronounced, SK. And this is killing the wines.
Well, that's it for now. If you are not a paid subscriber, if you'd like to become a paid subscriber to get full access to this and all the content at Beyond Organic Wine, you can easily do that at beyondorganicwine.substack.com. Thank you so much. And here's a little music from Colden Pro. A big thanks to him for this.
you.